In 1992, the Red Valley Cougars high school football team went to an away game in Oregon and disappeared without a trace. Only the empty, perfectly clean bus parking remained in place. There were no signs of a struggle. Evidence, too. The investigation quickly stalled, and time erased all hope. But 31 years later, in 2023, the case suddenly comes to life, all because of one fatal mistake by a coach who has been retired for a long time. Today you will hear how the quiet silence gave rise to a chain of lies, violence, and betrayal, which led to the terrible truth. This is a story about how one man sent children into a trap to hide a scandal, and kept this secret for more than 3 decades. You're listening, Behind the Veil. Let's get started. He leaned forward, hands trembling, eyes darting between the mirror and the detective. I told them to take the old logging road, to avoid the traffic on Route 17. The room fell silent. The detective blinked once. There had never been any mention of Route 17 in the official report. Subscribe for more true crime stories you won't find anywhere else. Like, comment, and share if you think cold cases deserve justice, even 30 years later. When the Red Valley Cougars vanished in 1992, it didn't just shock a town. It paralyzed an entire state. They were a team of 16 boys aged between 15 and 17, and one assistant coach, returning from a narrow loss at an away game in Brookside, Oregon. They were supposed to be home by midnight. Parents waited in the school parking lot until 3 a.m. At 4:12 a.m., the police were notified. By morning, the school bus was officially listed as missing. It was never found. No bodies, no bus, no skid marks, no broken guardrails, no signs of an accident, struggle, or foul play. It was as if the team had been plucked off the face of the earth. The state police launched one of the most extensive search operations in Oregon's history. Helicopters combed the forests. Rivers were dredged, and road crews scanned every possible detour along the route. All 17 were declared missing. The driver, a man named Ray Norman, 43, was considered either dead or responsible. His background was clean. He'd worked for the district for 6 years. Then he vanished, along with the boys. And then the years passed. News coverage dwindled. People moved on. The case became a legend. Ghost stories whispered at sleepovers. Local lore wrapped in fog and grief. The team that never came back. No charges. No answers. No peace. Until July 18th, 2023. Detective Sarah Delgado had only been 8 years old when the Cougars disappeared, but her uncle was one of the original investigators. She grew up hearing the whispers around her family's dinner table. She became a cop to chase stories like that one. 31 years later, she was staring at the retired coach of the Red Valley Cougars through a two-way mirror. Coach Gerard McLean, 72, widower, no children, former PE teacher. He'd stayed in Red Valley until his retirement in 2012, then moved to a small cabin near Mount Silverpine. He'd never been accused of anything, not even questioned beyond the initial interview in 1992. He wasn't on the bus that night. He'd claimed to be at home grading game reports, but McLean had requested a meeting, a voluntary one. A week earlier, Delgado had given a talk at a local town hall about reopening cold cases. The old man came up to her afterward. "You're wasting your time," he said. "Some things are buried for a reason." She'd taken it as bitterness. But then he sent a letter, a short typed note delivered by mail. "I might know something. I was afraid to speak then. I'm not afraid now." So here he was, sitting under fluorescent lights, flinching at every cough and creak. Delgado watched from the other side of the mirror while her colleague, Detective Ronald McKee, asked standard preliminary questions. Name, age, occupation. Why now? That's when McLean started to shake. I've been dreaming of them again, he whispered. All of them. Every night. What do you dream? McKee asked. The locker room, the bus, and that road, the old one near Route 17. The room fell still. Route 17 had never been mentioned in any police report. The planned route for the return trip went through Highway 8. Route 17 was an unpaved logging road, decommissioned in 1986 and known for landslides. It wasn't on any official detour map. The only way someone would bring it up was if they knew it had been used. Delgado stepped out from behind the mirror. Her voice was calm, precise. Mr. McLean, you just mentioned Route 17. Why? McLean looked up, confused. It's the one I told Ray to use, to get home faster. I figured it'd save us 20 minutes. He stopped. His mouth hung slightly open as if a string inside him had snapped. I thought, maybe that's what he did. But it was too late. The damage was done. Delgado leaned forward. That road was closed to the public in '86. How did you know it was still drivable? McLean's hand curled against his thigh, trembling. Because I drove it a week before. I tested it. The silence in the room thickened like wet concrete. He knew. 31 years of silence. 31 years of dead ends and unanswered questions. And now, finally, something had cracked. Detective Delgado didn't move. She didn't blink. Her body remained perfectly still as the gravity of the statement settled in the room like ash. You tested it, she repeated slowly, her voice stripped of any inflection. Why? McLean's jaw clenched. A twitch spasmed across his temple. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if debating whether to speak or collapse into himself. I thought it would help, he finally muttered. We'd lost the game. The boys were exhausted. Spirits were low. It was a shortcut, that's all. You told Ray Norman to use a decommissioned road in the dark, at night, with 16 kids in the back? Delgado's voice was low, firm, surgical. McLean flinched. I didn't know it was dangerous. It looked fine. Delgado stood, nodded once to McKee, and stepped out. The moment the door clicked behind her, she was already dialing. 2 hours later, a state geologist confirmed. The logging road adjacent to Route 17 had been officially shut down after a landslide in 1986. But an unmarked fork had been used illegally by hunters and off-roaders into the early 90s. A narrow, unstable path leading deep into the Cascadia forest, and eventually toward the crags surrounding Silver Pine Gorge. No one had ever searched that far south. By nightfall, Delgado had signed a warrant for access to McLean's private land near the Silver Pine region. Satellite imaging showed a suspicious clearing in the dense tree cover, something that hadn't been there the year before. On July 19th, a search team approached the location on foot. It was slow, grueling work. The terrain was overgrown, muddy, strewn with rotted pine trunks and jagged boulders. But after 6 hours, one of the dogs began barking furiously. Then the second. The third refused to go any further. What they found wasn't a grave. It was a structure, half collapsed, wood rotting, covered in decades of moss and vegetation, an old, abandoned U.S. Forest Service storage cabin, reinforced with concrete. No one had reported it in years. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and decay. The ground was uneven. Half the roof had caved in, and on the far wall, partially hidden behind a fallen cabinet, they saw it. A fragment of maroon fabric, faded but unmistakable. Red Valley's old jersey color. The tag on it was nearly worn off, but there was just enough thread left to read one stitched name. Lopez. Delgado froze. Daniel Lopez had been a sophomore. Number 23. Left wing. The building was declared a forensic site. Evidence markers covered the floor within an hour. Inside the central room, they found scraps of clothing, half-rusted metal fittings, and what appeared to be burnt remains in a makeshift fire pit, likely used for heat. No bodies, but signs of occupancy, human occupancy. One of the techs pulled Delgado aside. "You're going to want to see this," he said, leading her to the back wall. There, etched crudely into the wood, were rows of scratched lines, 23 of them grouped in fives, and beneath the final row, 4 words. "He said we'd be safe." Delgado read it 3 times. Each time, the temperature in the room seemed to drop further. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was. Back at headquarters, the interrogation room had gone cold. McLean sat hunched in the chair, staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. No cuffs yet, no lawyer, just the weight of 31 years pressing down on brittle bones. Detective McKee re-entered first, a manila folder in hand. He didn't open it. He simply set it on the table and sat down across from McLean. "Coach," he said quietly, "we found the cabin." McLean didn't react. McKee opened the folder and pulled out a single photo. The jersey scrap, the stitched name visible even in the degraded cloth. He slid it forward. McLean glanced once, and this time his hands began to tremble again. "We found signs of a fire pit," McKee continued. "Charred bones, clothing, etchings in the wall, names." Still no reaction. "We're not here to make assumptions, but we are reopening the case as a criminal investigation. And I need to ask you again, very carefully, what happened after the game in Brookside?" McLean looked up. His eyes, suddenly sharp, held something different now. Not guilt, not grief, something closer to calculation. "I wasn't supposed to be the one who talked to Ray that night," he said. "That was on admin. But nobody showed up, so I took charge." McKee didn't interrupt. "They told me there were rumors going around, about some of the boys, about what they'd seen, heard. I don't know. There'd been issues." "What kind of issues?" McLean hesitated. "A few players found out about a bribe, an arrangement. The game was supposed to be a loss." McKee frowned. "You're saying someone paid the school to throw a high school match?" "It wasn't just a game," McLean said. "It was regional. It affected college placements, sponsorships. There was a lot of money involved. Betting rings, mostly. Not local. Higher up." McKee leaned in. "And what does this have to do with the kids disappearing?" McLean's voice dropped to a whisper. "Some of them didn't want to stay quiet. One of the boys, I think it was Alex Griggs, said he'd recorded something. A call. Someone talking about it." McKee blinked. "And?" "I didn't know what to do." McLean whispered. "I was told to get them off the radar for a while. Just a few days. Just until things cooled off. They'd be taken to a cabin, talked to, scared a little, that's all. Just a little trip. And you chose Route 17. I drove it a week before. I made sure it was still passable. Ray was supposed to drop them off and come back. That's all." McLean's voice broke then, thin and papery. "But they never came back." McKee pressed forward. "Who gave you the order, Gerard?" Silence. "Who told you to send them off route?" McLean closed his eyes. A long pause. Then, "There was a man. Used to come to the games. Sat with the donors. Real quiet type. I never got his name. He said he was there to protect the program. Said if I didn't help, the whole school would burn." McKee sat back. It was thin, vague, but it was enough. Enough to warrant a deeper probe into the school district's finances, into records from '92, into betting slips, donors, hidden bank accounts. and enough to arrest Coach Gerard McLean for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and involvement in the disappearance of 17 minors. When they cuffed him, he didn't resist. As they led him down the hallway, past rows of cold blue lockers and framed photos of teams long gone, McLean whispered one last thing. "I didn't kill them." And maybe he didn't, but he sent them. The arrest sent a shockwave through Red Valley. The local news station scrambled for old footage. Within hours, dusty photos of the Cougars last season, sweaty boys in oversized jerseys, arms slung over each other, Coach McLean grinning at the center, flashed across every screen. Candlelight vigils were held outside the high school. Parents who'd buried empty coffins now watched from their living rooms as a man they'd once trusted was shoved into the back of a patrol car. Detective Delgado didn't go home that night. The next 48 hours were a frenzy. Search teams returned to the cabin site with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. Forensic analysts from Portland arrived. Dozens of new tips flooded the police hotline, many from people who claimed they'd always suspected something, but had stayed quiet out of fear, confusion, or shame. One call stood out. A retired janitor named Les Thurman, who'd worked at Red Valley High in the early 90s, left a message on Delgado's voicemail. His voice was raspy, tired. "You might want to check the old storage basement under the athletics wing," he said. "Coach McLean used to spend a lot of time down there after hours. I caught him once in '92. He said he was just organizing uniforms, but he didn't have any with him." Delgado was there within the hour. The entrance was tucked behind the gymnasium bleachers, locked with a rusted padlock. Maintenance had to cut it. The air below was damp, stale. A long corridor led to a narrow concrete room. Old lockers, broken folding chairs, abandoned equipment. And in the far corner behind a collapsed shelf, Delgado found a metal filing cabinet, its drawers jammed shut with rust. It took 20 minutes and a crowbar to pry the bottom one open. Inside were 2 VHS tapes, a bundle of old playbooks, and a Ziploc bag containing cassette recordings. Each cassette was labeled with a name: A. Griggs, T. O'Connor, J. Kim. The tapes were transferred to digital immediately. What they revealed confirmed what McLean had hinted at, and more. In one recording, a trembling teenage voice could be heard whispering into what sounded like a handheld recorder. "Coach said the refs were already paid, that we were just there to make it look close. I told Alex. He freaked out, said he was going to tell someone, said he recorded the call." The recording cut off. Another tape, crackly with age, caught fragments of an argument. Boys yelling in a moving vehicle. Someone shouting about being used. Another voice saying, "You think they're going to let us just walk away from this?" Delgado sat back, hands folded. It was no longer just a disappearance. It was a cover-up. It was systemic. That night, Delgado met with the district attorney. Warrants were expanded. New subpoenas were issued. And for the first time in 31 years, the families of the missing boys received an official message from the state police. "We have new evidence. We now believe your sons were victims of a conspiracy involving multiple individuals. We are pursuing justice." But not all questions had answers yet, because the boys were never found. Not all of them. August 3rd, 2023, 06:42 a.m., Silver Pine National Forest. It was the drone operator who first saw it, a glint beneath the trees near the base of the cliff, less than 2 miles from the abandoned cabin. At first it looked like scrap metal, but as the drone tilted lower, the outline became clear. A bus, or what was left of one. The team mobilized instantly. Delgado arrived by helicopter. The site was cordoned off within the hour. A camera crew tried to breach the outer perimeter but was turned back by armed patrol. The bus was lying on its side, half buried in mud and forest debris. Moss covered most of the exterior. The roof had partially caved in. The back doors hung open, dangling like loose limbs. Inside it was dark, rotted, collapsed in places. Forensics worked slowly. One by one they began to find bones. Not full skeletons. Too much time had passed, the environment too harsh, but enough to start identifying. Personal items were still scattered across the floor. A cracked Game Boy, a class ring, a Red Valley varsity jacket. Then came the final blow. Near the front of the bus, trapped beneath the collapsed driver's seat, they found a rusted pistol. Police issue, registered to Ray Norman, the bus driver. Ballistics confirmed it had been fired once. What happened on that bus in 1992 was no longer speculation. Someone, or several people, had herded the boys into the forest, possibly under threat. They'd reached the cabin, but they never came back. And the driver, he either turned on them or tried to protect them. The records were incomplete. The truth was murky. But one thing became clear. Whatever the plan had been, it had spiraled out of control. Back at headquarters, McLean refused to speak further. His lawyer now answered all questions. The press speculated endlessly. Some blamed McLean for ordering the detour. Others suggested higher-ups in the school district orchestrated everything. A few dug deeper, pointing fingers at underground betting syndicates tied to organized crime. Delgado, for her part, remained focused. There was still one final lead, hidden in the tapes from the school basement. One of the last cassettes, nearly inaudible, featured a conversation recorded through static. Two voices. Male. One sounded like McLean. The other remained unknown. "You said they'd be scared, that's all. You were told to control them, not start a mutiny. There were kids, for Christ's sake." Pause. They weren't supposed to get hurt. Then a long silence. Then, "Don't forget who paid for your damn truck, Gerard. You want to lose that too?" The recording ended. Delgado played it again and again. She didn't yet know who the second voice belonged to, but she would. The voice on the tape haunted Delgado. They ran it through audio enhancement software. Forensics couldn't clean it perfectly. The cassette was nearly degraded, but one key detail emerged. A name. Mumbled, almost lost in the static. Should have let Braxton handle it. Delgado froze. Braxton. There'd only ever been one Braxton tied to Red Valley High. Keith Braxton, former athletic director, 1988-1994, retired, moved out of state, still alive. 2 days later, Delgado flew to Las Cruces, New Mexico. Braxton lived alone in a gated community near the desert's edge. Tidy lawn, flagpole, white patio furniture untouched by dust. He greeted her at the door with a forced smile and eyes that didn't blink enough. "I already talked to some people," he said. "They told me the coach confessed. Sad story." Delgado didn't answer. She waited. Braxton stepped aside. "Come in if you must." The house was spotless, cold, not a photograph in sight, not a newspaper, not a sign of the past. "Why don't you tell me what you remember about the 1992 team?" she asked. Braxton raised an eyebrow. "What is this nostalgia? I managed 20 seasons. I barely remember last week." Delgado reached into her folder and pulled out the transcript. "Do you recognize this conversation?" She slid the page across the table. Braxton scanned it. His hand stopped halfway down the sheet. "This is illegal," he muttered. "Recording without consent." Delgado cut him off. "It's enough for a subpoena, and it places you in contact with McLean in the days before the team disappeared." Braxton's face changed. Not with guilt, with calculation. "Look," he said quietly. "Things weren't what they seemed back then. There was pressure. from outside. Betting was creeping into high school sports. Not officially, not publicly, but it was there. "And you got a piece," Delgado said. Braxton didn't deny it. McLean wasn't supposed to know the full story, just enough to push the boys off the radar for a few days. Calm them down. Make them think someone else would handle the fallout. But something went wrong. Braxton looked away. The driver panicked. Or maybe the kids did. One of them had a tape. He threatened to go public. There was shouting. I got a call the next day. They were gone. "Who called you?" Pause. Anonymous number. Never heard from them again. Delgado leaned in. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Braxton met her gaze, dead on. Because by then, it was already too late. And because no one wanted the real story getting out. "You think I was the only one involved? Look harder." Half that school board knew. And the rest? They knew enough to keep quiet. Delgado stood. She didn't arrest him that day. Not yet. But the name Keith Braxton was added to a growing list of suspects in an expanding case. Back in Oregon, DNA tests confirmed 6 of the found remains matched members of the team. 11 boys were still unaccounted for. And one of the tapes, labeled simply 17, remained unplayable, the reel mangled, blackened at the edge. Delgado handed it to a specialist lab. If it could be restored, it might be the final key. And if not, then someone out there still held the last piece. The lab called on a Thursday. Delgado had been reviewing property records from 1991, searching for transactions tied to shell companies and the names of donors who'd funded Red Valley's athletics wing, when the phone lit up. "We recovered the tape," the tech said. "You're going to want to hear this." She was at the lab 30 minutes later. The cassette, charred at one edge, had been spliced, stabilized, and transferred to digital. A voice analyst sat with her, headphones already on, his face pale. "This one's different," he warned. "You won't be hearing teenagers." The recording clicked on. It was a room. Echoed. Metal chairs. Low voices. "So the driver knows?" McLean gave him the route. "Says the kids are talking." A pause. "I told you we should have used a van. Too many eyes on that damn bus." Another voice. Calm. Southern. Measured. "We can't undo it now. They'll be out of range by 9 p.m. And after that, nature'll do the rest." Delgado sat forward. A new voice entered. Young. Anxious. "This isn't what we agreed on. They're just kids. You signed the contract. You got your payout. You don't get nerves now. I just wanted them scared. Not, you wanted silence. This is silence." Click. The tape cut out. Delgado stared at the waveform still on the screen. "Can you match any voices?" she asked quietly. The analyst nodded. The second speaker, we've isolated him, matched against a phone recording from the 92 tapes. His name's on a donor list from Red Valley's athletic boosters. "Who?" He turned the screen. A still frame from an old fundraiser gala blinked into view. Matthew Dorrance, former district superintendent, now CEO of a regional logistics company. Still wealthy. Still local. Delgado stood. It took 3 days to build the case. Dorrance had never been tied to the school's sports program directly, but he'd made quiet donations via third parties. His name was never on plaques or yearbooks, but he showed up in financial records hidden inside bundled trusts. Records now unsealed via court order. In 1992, he'd been a rising political star in the county, backed by investors from the Pacific betting circuit. He had motive. The boys had discovered recordings, names, account numbers, and they'd threatened to go public. Delgado got the warrant signed on a rainy Monday. When the tactical team moved on Dorrance's lake house in Sandpoint, he didn't resist. He opened the door, looked at the badge and said, "Took you long enough." Inside, in a locked office beneath the stairs, they found boxes, tapes, documents, names, payment schedules, and a list, handwritten, of every member of the 1992 Cougars team. Each name had a check mark beside it, all except one. Lucas Dell, the youngest on the team, 16, reserve striker, quiet, unremarkable. His parents had moved away after the incident, heartbroken. Delgado tried calling every number she could find. All were disconnected. Then she called a tip line in Idaho, a long shot, and someone answered. "I know that name," the woman said. "He worked maintenance at my brother's place 2 summers ago. Went by Luke. Quiet guy. Had a scar on his wrist. Said he used to play ball." Within 48 hours, Delgado had an address, a cabin on the edge of a lumber town in Montana. She drove through the night, GPS flickering as the road narrowed into gravel. The cabin was modest. Old. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lucas Dell answered the door slowly. He was older now, 47, but she recognized the eyes. Haunted, sharp. He didn't run, didn't flinch. "I wondered when you'd find me," he said. They sat on the porch, wind in the trees, the sky bruised with cloud. "I didn't stay in that cabin," Lucas said. "Not the whole time. I left after 3 days, slipped out through the woods while the others were asleep." "Why didn't you come forward?" Delgado asked. "I tried," he said. "In '93. I went to a local station, told them I'd seen the team die out there. They thought I was crazy. Said there was no evidence. Called my parents. They thought I was having an episode. Got committed for 6 weeks. He rubbed his hands together. By the time I got out, it was too late. Nobody cared. Everyone had moved on. And those men, they still had reach. I was scared." Delgado nodded slowly. "But you survived." He looked away. "No. I ran." They sat in silence. "I can testify," he said finally. "I remember names, places, what they said. I remember the man who came to the cabin that second night, the one who promised we'd be safe." "Who was he?" Lucas's voice cracked. "McLean." The trial began 6 months later. Gerard McLean, Keith Braxton, Matthew Dorrance, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, criminal negligence, and complicity in the deaths of minors. The courtroom was packed every day. Lucas Dell testified for 4 hours. Jurors wept. Reporters ran live coverage. After 31 years, Red Valley finally heard the truth. The boys had tried to speak. The system had buried them. The verdict: guilty. All counts, all defendants. Sentences: life. The Red Valley Cougars were reburied on school grounds beneath a new monument. A nameplate for each player. Flowers laid by strangers. Silence, at last, reclaimed by justice. Delgado stood at the edge of the field, eyes on the grass where boys once ran in cleats and laughter. Some stories never wanted to be found, but she found it anyway. And this time, it stayed open.